We're going to look at OpenAI today and some of the recent important developments for the company. And for each of them, we'll talk about whether it's something and we should pay attention to it or nothing and it's really not that big a deal for the company. So here we go, something or nothing. First item is an OpenAI device doesn't seem like it's going to be making its way to market before the Christmas gift season this year. So is this something or nothing? Well, I really think this is actually something. We're a bit removed now from Johnny Ive coming over to OpenAI and all the pictures and press and real big narrative around that, and haven't heard really that much since. I think part of this is really thinking about like what the retail calendar is, and I remember back in 2007 or so when the iPhone was launching, that was announced over the summer. That was kind of like the summer launch aspect of it, and they had a lot of different relationships that they put in place, like I think with AT&T first for distribution, but it was all like, let's build this drumbeat, let's build things kind of going for the Christmas season. I just feel like if they were going to have something that came in before Christmas launch, the hype train would have started moving already. For that, if they're going to drop the product like right before Christmas, I feel like we would start to be hearing murmurs and rumors and things like that. So it does seem like they've already missed that window. And well, I think that things are moving here, right? Like Meta is already moving on this with the glasses. You've got Apple, who already has the watch, and they've got the iPhones as well. So they're in a position where like they seem to be wanting to move a little bit slower, or otherwise they're not kind of pushing the pace on things. And so the fact that OpenAI isn't like close to getting this out the door, I feel like that doesn't play to their strengths with it, both against Meta as well as with Apple, and like giving everybody else like more time to kind of figure things out with it. It also means probably the product as it was when they bought Johnny Ive's studio and everything like that wasn't close enough, or this was not like fully shovel ready, let's say, or ready kind of for production. So this all seems like a little bit more preliminary at this point, and maybe it casts it a little bit more about like being fundraising than maybe actual belief in the product, like the idea that you could launch some amazing product that's physical and connect with chat gpt sounds great, sounds like a big market expanding story with it. Whether there's actually like something there, I think we're gonna find out maybe at some point soon. And it was really like a relatively small amount of cash for OpenAI to put down to kind of unlock more fundraising momentum by buying this potential. So I do think it's something where we kind of see that like as we flip over those cards, there's maybe not as much there with it. Okay, next one. OpenAI browser doesn't seem like it's going to be happening until later this year. If you look at the odds on Polymarket, it does seem like maybe late this year is kind of like where people seem to be in consensus on when OpenAI's browser would come in. And is this something or nothing? The fact that it's only coming out much later in the year, to me, this is nothing. I just don't think the timing is actually all that significant on this. And part of that is just driven by the fact that Chrome already has their browser in the market, right? They're already the kind of like clear leader with it. I think as the market is developing and we looked at in our browser tiers as we broke it down, I don't think Perplexity is a serious enough threat here to like really be pushing the pace and like kind of momentum with it. And more important, I think, overall with this is less on the timing and like actually nailing it for people and creating this like really good experience of like how is ChatGPT integrated in the browsing experience. And I think for OpenAI to really be thinking of like way beyond the like tech and tech media and people that are going to try these products anyway because they're interested, but just more normal usage. And I think that's where OpenAI has some real advantages. They have huge amounts of people using ChatGPT. They understand what people are trying to accomplish with it that maybe isn't so they're not delivering such an amazing experience on today that they can accomplish with the browser. They've been in, with the operator product, they've gotten into this sort of stuff. So I think it's more a matter of like really making sure that they nail the product than feeling so much of a rush on the timing of this. And I do think it could be a huge benefit from a revenue perspective if they can pull it off, but not necessarily a rush job. And what I mean from a revenue perspective is if you think about a lot of the things that happen within the browser, It's things like shopping, which is a big use case. It could be things like, researching certain things or trying to understand certain things, like whether that's in the medical space for a lot of people's lives, let's say, those types of topics. And I think from a, shopping, booking flights perspective, travel, these types of things, they are seeing this as like, okay, we can insert ourselves in and we're going to kind of take a transaction fee, whether that's booking certain things and kind of feeling like, okay, we're establishing ourselves as a new middleman in here, and that the ChatGPT AI will go out and kind of do these things for you. Maybe you'll have the decision on it. I think you can already see some of these mental models that Perplexity has played with. I'm sure ChatGPT is heading in a lot of those same sorts of directions. They'll try to perfect it and they'll try to blow other people out of the market with it down below, and then ultimately try to fight it out with Google Chrome if they really feel that that's the battle that they want to take on there. So I think this is more getting it right than really caring so much about the timing for it. And I feel like there's less pressure in the browser space for that. Okay, next one. So OpenAI open sourced two different models recently, one of which can fit on an iPhone, the other which can fit like on a MacBook, and that allows you to be able to run these models locally without even connecting to the internet, which is really cool. And they're open source, so you can play around with them, you can adjust them. Very similar to like Facebook's Llama, as if you've used that sort of thing before. And overall, I think, is this something? Is this nothing? To me, it's really nothing. I think it's almost so convoluted, these discussions about open source and how it matters or why it matters. Maybe it matters to like a very small group of people. Now, maybe some of those people are employees at these companies. Okay, I get it. But I think for most people, it's really hard to figure out what really the point of open source is. Like, I get that there's some theoretical advantages of like people using it and giving feedback or pushing it forward and being able to learn on it. But like, okay, somewhat theoretical there. I don't see that much practically if you've got these like great teams that have been able to take it very far right so far, where a lot of the work has been kind of under closed source. And maybe they realized more strategically that this version that they open source was going to be close soon to others that were coming out, like the Chinese models that have been developing or otherwise. And so they figured like, okay, let me just take this PR benefit, but probably more in a substantial way. Like, let me just move this whole narrative on. We're kind of sick of talking about open source and like how that plays and why we don't do it and other people do. Like, let's just move the discussion. We don't like that conversation. Let's move it to other places where like we do like it and we do want to be. So I think that makes sense overall for me. But on this, this seems like a nothing burger. And I think everybody should move off of it. Last one. Okay. OpenAI price cuts. So OpenAI has dramatically cut some of its pricing in comparison to other models. And I do think this is really something. I think that this starts to put pressure on Anthropic and change the nature of the competition here. Some of the rates for reference that I've seen are about 7 times or so lower than the Anthropic Opus model, just in kind of comparing, where the cuts were. And I think this kind of signals in some sense like that it's time for some competition and for some shakeout here. I think there had been this narrative of ChatGPT really owns consumer, and they've got 700 million users that are on it regularly, huge kind of mind share space in consumer. But over here on enterprise, like, well, Anthropic is doing really well and their revenue is growing great and they've got Claude Code. And is OpenAI just kind of ceding that ground and allowing them to kind of do that? Well, I think that was kind of some of the element here that was coming together. And I think OpenAI didn't like that narrative. They are not ready to say, hey, we're going to just like cede this major part of the market to it. And I think the price changes really kind of go at, okay, how can we be more competitive in enterprise? How can we throw a wrench into some of the sales processes there? And that when people are kind of comparing head to head, they have to really now consider price. And I think that as the models are starting to get closer and closer together in performance, that means that price kind of becomes a lever. And, OpenAI sees that like Anthropic's margin is their opportunity here. And in the models getting closer to and closer together, like what I mean by that is, I've used Grok pretty extensively. I've used a number of the OpenAI models as well, and Opus pretty extensively through Claude Code. I would say now, just using the different models, it does seem like there's less of gaps in some of the capabilities than there had been previously. I think everybody's got different experiences depending on what their use cases are, but it's not obvious and it's becoming like less obvious for people where those some of those real advantages lie. And so pricing becomes kind of an important part of competition for it, depending on the use cases with it. And meanwhile, when I zoom out from this, I think NVIDIA is loving this. I mean, they're sitting back with like their feet up and just thinking like there's really nothing better than having two big customers having a price war, to drive demand for your chips. And so I think pretty excited about that development. But this does seem like the price cuts are really something. It's the start of a new phase. It's an acceleration for it. And OpenAI isn't just kind of seeding that ground, seeding that territory. So it'll be interesting to watch some of the back and forth that develops with that. So let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. Are these things something? Are they really nothing? What did I miss? Subscribe and get more analysis on private tech companies.